Oh, hi. You expect a skit in every video now? Today I want to talk a little bit about my latest release, Turning, and how I made it, and why I made it, and how you can make it too. Except that would be theft of intellectual property, so please don't. For those of you who are more interested in like the origins of this track and the inspiration and how I came up with the ideas, I'm gonna do a full audio track-by-track commentary that I'm gonna release with the album on Bandcamp. So if you've already pre-ordered the album, you're gonna get that on release day as well. Just a teeny tiny bit of info about that and how this track came to be. It was written in 2020, early 2020, and that was a time, as you might recall, when a lot of us weren't doing just a whole lot. For my day job, I am a church organist. If you've been around the channel for a while, you probably know that. And that church sat empty for months. No services happening, there was no live music for me to play for there, and that allowed me to simply take all my recording gear to the church and just mess around and experiment for several weeks. And that's exactly what I did. And this album came out of that, those experiments using the organic pun instruments found in the church. Primarily the organ itself, a very large 70 rank pipe organ, and the choir room piano, which is a 100-year-old Mason and Hamlin grand that has absolutely been beaten to death over the years in choir rehearsals. And you can definitely tell that when you look at it or listen to it. So after I would record these improvisations at the church, I would bring it back to my studio and start to mess around with some of the gear that I have here. Originally, I just took my laptop, which had Ableton Live on it, to the church and just improvised with just the laptop and the piano. And out of that came this. It started out with a stock Ableton synth, which I don't do a lot, but I had just gotten Ableton just a few months prior and was messing around with it and just wanted something kind of to improvise over the top of that would provide me with some inspiration. And I found this, which it looks like is an operator synth as well as a sample-based instrument kind of layered together. And I did some tweaking in there, of course, as I like to do. And that is the bed and the basis, the foundation for this whole track that really kicked the whole thing off. What I really like about it, it has this ascending whole step pattern, which is something like, right? Just holding one note, it does that and drones underneath it. I like to play around with the kind of blurry lines between major and minor, and essentially that's what came out of the piano improvisation. From that, I ended up with this. Seems like we're in F sharp major, but it's kind of mysterious and we're not quite sure where we're going from here. And then the first bass note that comes in right there, it's like, oh, well maybe we're not in F sharp at all. Sounds a bit like D major at this point, which D is the major sixth in the key of F sharp. But we still have that. And what that gives us is a hint of an augmented chord, which I use augmented triads a lot. If you're familiar with my music, I like whole tones. That ties right into augmented triads. Lots of whole step movement where it kind of creates some clashy harmonics. It's also the reason I don't get on the peaceful piano playlist on Spotify. Fun fact. So what we have here, if I can pull up the keyboard, maybe you can see it easier. Which key are we in? Are we in D major? Are we in F sharp major? Or is it F sharp minor? And the answer is yes, it's F sharp minor. So that is the key right there. That's where we finally arrive. We don't stay there long. So the whole point of this is to create some ambiguity with the harmony. So continuing, while we're on this tiny little composition music theory lesson, I want to show you how just by speeding up the progression of the bass line and keeping the same harmonies above it, you totally can change all of the harmonies. Changing the bass changes everything. So here we have 2 treble notes for every bass note. And when I speed that up, I'm using the same bass line, but it shifts everything like this, right? So now everything's moving together and it creates a whole new harmony. So that sounds like this. Right there is what I don't like. So what you may notice when I just demonstrated it for you, I didn't double. And what I mean by doubling is that is the weakest point in this entire track to me, where I go locked in octaves A and A, right? I only have 2 voices to play with. When you double and you only have 2 voices, you really eliminate one of your 2 voices and you only have 1 voice. Now, I kind of get away with it. I don't go in parallel octaves. In other words, I don't go boring. I go contrary motion. So it's still decent part writing, but when I only have 2 voices, I want to double as little as possible, especially when they're moving lockstep with each other as they are here. I probably realized it because I heard that weakness when those 2 voices became 1. Clearly my ears picked up on something I didn't like right here. There, that's the weak point. Listen to this one, it's different. I changed the bass. Changed it again, yeah. Just by changing a bass note, you can change everything. And I know I've gotten a bit technical here, but if you are a composer, I've given you something that's really valuable, hopefully. Don't double. Double as little as possible. That is the key to having interesting harmonies, because anytime you double, you draw attention to that one thing that you doubled, and you actually thin out your harmonies, right? So if I only have 3 notes and 2 of them are the same, I've weakened the harmony. Okay, enough theory talk. So let's talk about the rest of this ambient layer that I fleshed out. It came from this right here, which I actually still have the sample up here at the very top. Now this is me muting 2 of the strings and then playing a 3rd note that's not muted. So I'm doing this with my hand to mute the strings. Now you may notice that you hear sounds like this in the track, but they're not exactly this. That's because I took that, deactivate that again, and dropped it into a sampler. And then I picked a range that I thought sounded good, and I just had it ping pong back and forth. And it's doing some panning here within the sampler as well. Actually, this is sampler, not simpler, isn't it? Yeah. So that is happening along with this operator synth. And then you may also notice that there are some seemingly granular, tinkly, weird textural stuff happening here. And you know how much I love my granular, tinkly, weird textural stuff. So yes, that's exactly what it is. That is Native Instruments Stray Light, which I did a whole video about before, with that same piano sample. And I kind of have it centered around some of the mechanical sounds of the piano, the scrapes and clicks and all that kind of stuff. It sounds like this. And then eventually I do have a more rhythmic, that I'm playing live, finger mute type thing happening with the strings that sounds like this. It's not perfect. Adds a lot of character. I love hearing all that mechanical noise. So all together, you may notice also that I've chopped this up and kind of moved it around to fit with the track as I arranged things later on. The piano part is pretty much unchanged. Now, production-wise, you may notice that the piano is split into two parts. These are identical, but I've split it out so that I can treat the treble of the piano one way and the bass of the piano another way. This is a really good technique if you have an instrument that takes up a large frequency range, like a piano, to be able to treat the bass frequencies in a way that is more conducive to bass frequencies. In other words, we don't want as much reverb, we don't want it to be as wide. And you notice I have the bass monoed out below 120 hertz here. And I definitely had to do a lot of work on this piano recording. If I go into my automations, you can see where I've drawn in volume ducts, because some of these notes are just not well regulated, which means when you go up and down the keyboard, certain notes really pop out of the texture. It just comes from being an old beat up piano. So I would duct them both with a compressor, but also sometimes you just need to draw things in. See, those were really harsh. So I took the edge off the old-fashioned way. These are the little kind of things that you do that will save you time in the long run. When you're trying to mix or master at the end and you're wondering why it's smacking your limiter so hard, you may have these little spikes that you need to go into the mix and clean up. I used the neutron EQ to remove all the highs from the bass part. Take out some muddiness as well. Still pretty muddy because there are no highs. That's the treble. Done the same thing here. Let's talk about the drums, because that's a big part of the climax of this track. It's a loop, which maybe that's cheating, maybe not. I don't know where you stand on that, but again, this was all about doing this in isolation, and I'm not a drummer. So here I took a loop, I stretched it out, slowed it way down, and chopped it up and rearranged some things, which is something I like to do, and then I rendered it all out here. And then I absolutely obliterated it with Decapitator in two different flavors. Here, it's a very dark distortion. This comes in with a brighter distortion. I've also got drum bus and Ableton stock plugin here just to kind of give that a little bit more oomph. Sometimes you need a tiny bit of EQ after your distortion just to make things sit in the mix. I use the Neutron 2. I haven't upgraded obviously in a while. Just because it's a dynamic EQ. Getting the drums and the piano to sit together were a bit of a challenge, and I went to Track Spacer to carve out a little bit of the low end every time that the drums hit, right? So you can see that. It's fairly subtle. Allows a little bit more punch in the low end of the drums. You really have to shape pianos. If you're going to mix them with other things, they typically take up a tremendous amount of the frequency spectrum. So that's just something that you will have to keep in mind. If you want to mix other things with your pianos, don't be afraid to carve out room. So the very last thing that I added to this track was the Lyra 8. It would have been fine without it, but this screeching, screaming analog monster that is the Lyra 8 just really put this over the top for me. It's part of the ambient layer, highly textured. I've got shaper box on this, I believe. Yes, here it is right here. And that's doing two things. It's panning very slowly in this weird pattern the high frequencies. And that's the great thing about shaper box from sound guys, cable guys, from cable guys, is that you can split effects into different frequency bands. We get this ducking effect. That's also shaper box, just doing some volume ducking there. It's like side chaining, but not really. Fake chaining. You notice that I have that automated where the side chaining effect is coming and going as we play through. Over here, very heavy side chain. But again, it's just the higher frequencies that are ducking. So all together, all of the ambient layers sound like this. With the drums. I also have track spacer doing some ducking for the piano here. So I want the piano to be in front of the ambient layers. I want the drums to punch out through the low mids of the piano. So playing around with harmonies between major and minor, not really sure which key we're in for a while, keeping it mysterious. Drums crunched and in your face, very distorted, and coming right up the middle through this kind of expansive bed of ambient texture that we have, which is a combination of digital synths, the analog drones from the Lyra, as well as very organic sounds from the piano mechanism. And that's it. There aren't a ton of elements here, but I think they all work together pretty well. I was really happy with the way this mix came together. So all together, when we get to that climax, it sounds like this. Thanks a lot for sticking around through this one. I know this one maybe is a little bit more dry than some of my other videos, but I think this is important to show like how I actually make music so that maybe you can take something from it, and if you learned anything from it today, I will be super happy. To those of you who have already pre-ordered the album, Thank you so much. That really means more than you could possibly know to me. If you like streaming, you can just listen to this track on Spotify, Apple Music, any of the places where you get your music. Full album is out in December, early December, so much more to come. Maybe I'll do a couple more of these breakdowns from the album on other tracks if you like this one. So give it a thumbs up if you did like it. That will tell me that you liked it. Leave a comment if you want to hear more. And subscribe if you learned anything from this video. I really appreciate you sticking around, and I'll see you next time. Bye.